Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Kateri, for that beautiful talk, and thank you for sharing your beautiful artwork. It's a wonderful presentation. And thanks for the nice introduction, Alan. I've been taking photographs for more than 50 years. I'm a lifelong, thus far, resident of East Aurora. And I've been a Roycroft artisan for 5 years. And this June, I became a master artisan. We'll talk a little bit about that process later. As we begin, we have a picture here of John Ruskin looking relaxed and content. It's an engraving by Francis Hall, 1857, after a painting by George Richmond. Of Ruskin's numerous artistic gifts, photography is probably the least known. In 1835, Ruskin first visited Venice with his parents. He would return 10 times. On his 1845 trip, he purchased some daguerreotypes from a photographer, identified only as the Frenchman. Ruskin was very enthusiastic about this new technology. The daguerreotype process had only become widely available about 3 years earlier. Ruskin purchased a quarter-plate daguerreotype camera and returned to Venice to document architectural details. He made daguerreotypes with his valets, John Hobbs and Frederick Crawley, and with professional photographers, Fortunato Lasagna and Le Cavalier Hier, the Frenchman. This is by the Frenchman. It's in Venice, and you'll recognize St. Mark's and the Piazza. It's a quarter-plate daguerreotype from 1845. John Ruskin wrote to his father, October 7th, 1845. I have been lucky enough to get from a poor Frenchman here, said to be in distress, some most beautiful, though small, daguerreotypes of the palaces I have been trying to draw. And certainly daguerreotypes taken by this vivid sunlight are glorious things. It is very nearly the same as carrying off the palace itself. Every chip of stone and stain is there. And of course, there is no mistake about proportions. I am very much delighted with these, and am going to have some more made of pet bits. It is a noble invention, say what they will of it. And anyone who has worked and blundered and stumbled, as I have, for 4 days, and then sees the thing he has been trying to do so long in vain, done perfectly and faultlessly in half a minute, won't abuse it afterward. It's interesting, the exposure time is maybe 30 seconds here, and you can see some of these men stood pretty still, and some of them were moving around. This is also by the Frenchman. It's the Grand Canal and the Casa de Oro under restoration, a quarter-plate daguerreotype in 1845. Ruskin writes from the lamp of memory, "Do not let us talk then of restoration. The thing is a lie from beginning to end. You may make a model of a building as you may of a corpse, and your model may have the shell of the old walls within it, as your cast may have the skeleton. With what advantage, I neither see nor care. The old building is destroyed, and that more totally and mercilessly than had it sunk into a heap of dust or melted into a mass of clay. More has been gleaned out of desolated Nineveh than will ever be out of rebuilt Milan. But, it is said, there may come a time for restoration. Granted, look the necessity full in the face and understand it on its own terms. It is a necessity for destruction. Accept it as such, pull the building down, throw its stones into neglected corners, make ballast to them, or mortar if you will. But do it honestly, and do not set up a lie in their place. And look that necessity in the face before it comes, and you may prevent it. John Ruskin's drawing of the Casa d'Oro, 1845. Ruskin used his daguerreotypes as an important resource for the stones of Venice. He felt the need to document the architectural treasures of the city before they were lost forever to careless and destructive restoration efforts. Ruskin felt the time would be saved with the use of the daguerreotype camera, allowing him to capture more photographs of structures before they were ruined. The urgency he felt is evident in this from a letter he wrote to his father on September 23rd, 1845. What an unhappy day I spent yesterday before the Casa d'Oro, vainly attempting to draw it while the workmen were hammering it down before my face. John Ruskin and John Hobbs, Venice, the Ducal Palace, southeast angle. It's Noah's Vine, detail of Noah's Vine, circa 1849, 1852. It's a quarter plate daguerreotype. This is John Ruskin, circa 1845, 1852. St. Mark's, Venice. In a letter home on October 15th, 1845, Ruskin wrote more in praise of the daguerreotype. Among all the mechanical poison that this terrible 19th century has poured upon men, it has given us at any rate one antidote, the daguerreotype. It is a most blessed invention, that's what it is. Ruskin would hold contradictory stances on photographs through time. Photographic historian Ken Jacobson writes, he was often instantly and deeply drawn to them aesthetically and emotionally, berating himself for not being able to do as well with his brush. But inevitably, his more spiritual self would later reject them because he deemed them to be created by a machine. In Modern Painters, Volume 4, Ruskin criticized the technical shortcomings of the medium, especially in underexposed shadows and overexposed highlights, quoting, photography either exaggerates the shadows or loses detail in the light, which in many ways, misses certain subtleties of the natural effect, which are often the things that Turner has chiefly aimed at, while it renders the subtleties of form which no human hand could achieve. This is Ruskin in his study at Brentwood by his acolyte, W.G. Collingwood. Collingwood describes the details. In the window are some of his own books in the Ruskin purple calf bindings, grass of Parnassus in a tumbler of water, and a box of early daguerreotypes of Venice. I'm going to call your attention to those. There's the grass of Parnassus. And here are those purple books. And here, sort of behind the drape and the chair, the cat's chair, is that box. It's got a brass handle there. And it's sort of a reddish color. After Ruskin's death in 1900, and despite instructions in his will for its upkeep, Brentwood on Coniston Water suffered from neglect and deferred maintenance. On a rainy day in July of 1931, the dispersal of the contents took place at the estate. Among the items was lot 134. The listing in the catalog described it: mahogany case with brass handles, containing a large quantity of photographic plates. Lot 134 sold for 6 shillings. There were some curtains that sold for more than 6 shillings in that particular auction. This is from Auctioneers Farmers and Kidd, lot 132 in 2006. In 2006, the photographic historians Ken and Jenny Jacobson bought an unassuming lot at an auction in Penrith, Cumbria. It was listed as a mahogany box with an ivory tag marked Vienna, containing 19th century photographs of buildings and stonework. They felt the lot was of particular significance, and it turns out they were correct. The lot included 188 daguerreotypes of Venice, Tuscany, and Chamonix, purchased, commissioned, or made by John Ruskin between 1849 and 1855, as he wrote The Stones of Venice. The box and its contents disappeared after the auction at Brentwood on that rainy day in 1931. It's difficult to overstate the import of that finding. This is Ken Jacobson's photograph of that box, and I love how it's almost at the same angle as in Collingwood's painting. And so here we see the inscription and the brass handle. Ken and Jenny Jacobson wrote a book about their experience called Carrying Off the Palaces. It is a robust work of scholarship and an invaluable resource for students of photography and John Ruskin. The book catalogs all of Ruskin's photographs. Lot 132 more than doubled the number of known Ruskin photographs and contains the earliest known photos of the Alps. Their book details the preservation and restoration efforts of their fantastic find, discusses where the images were created, and puts them into context with Ruskin's watercolors and drawings of the same subjects. It was winner of the Apollo Book Award 2015 and the Ruskin Society Book Prize. This is the Ruskin room atop the Roycroft, my photograph 2017. Atop the tower addition to the original print shop, the Ruskin room has served as a workspace for illuminating books, an office, and guest accommodations throughout the years. Albert Hubbard visited England in 1849. He was inspired by the thriving arts and crafts movement and visited the homes of many authors, philosophers, poets, and artists, most notably Ruskin's Brentwood on Coniston Water, William Wordsworth's grave, 11 miles from Brentwood at St. Oswald's in Grasmere, and William Morris's Kelmscott Press. This is Ali Baba, and he's in front of the print shop. It's a photograph by Francis Benjamin Johnston around 1898. And this tower, and right in this area here, houses the Ruskin room. This is currently the lounge at the Roycroft Inn, my photograph from August 2017. The lounge is located in what was originally the first print shop. With its Gothic arched windows and timber frame interior, the print shop recalls St. Oswald's in Grassmere. Kateri shared this very door. Door in the salon, my photograph, August 2020. Ruskin's quote, "Fine art is that in which the hand, head, and heart of man go together," is distilled to 3 words in this carving. Hubbard embraced the philosophy and endeavored to make a workplace that afforded artisans dignity and honored their work. The Roycroft shops became a place where workers were encouraged to expand their skills and were mentored. They were given 45 minutes each day to learn to play a musical instrument, and men and women received equal pay. East Aurora, New York, 1909. The Roycroft Campus was growing at the corner of South Grove and Main Street. So there's the chapel, there's the second print shop. The inn was going in right here. Roycroft Chapel door, 1899. My photograph from October 2020. It's inscribed, "Life without industry is guilt, and industry without art is brutality." It's a quote from John Ruskin, Lectures on Art, 3rd lecture, 1870. Albert Hubbard's Roycroft was situated at the junction of industry and art. Albert Hubbard, unknown photographer, 1907. Hubbard was a gregarious and persuasive salesman. His quirky homespun philosophy spoke to people. He was a dynamic speaker, and his lectures were a hot ticket. Most important for the success of the Roycroft, however, were the skills he learned at the Larkin Company, recruiting, guiding, and managing a rapidly growing workforce. This is the north door of the new print shop. My photograph, September 2016. Blessed is that man who has found his work. This motto by the Scottish writer Thomas Carlyle embodies the goal Hubbard had for the Roycroft shops. I call this picture Print Shop Renaissance. My photograph from December of 2014. With the chapel at the left, the Roycroft Renaissance mark of the Roycrofters-at-Large, the second print shop, and the shipping department. Artists who apply to become Roycroft Renaissance artisans present 4 pieces of work to a jury of master artisans. Their work is judged on 5 criteria: high quality hand craftsmanship, excellence of design, originality of expression, professional recognition, and artistic growth. If the prospective artist meets the criteria, they may use the mark on their original artwork. Artisans must rejury each year. This part of the mark represents the tree of life, and these branches point back to our history. These branches on the right point to our future. These back-to-back R's stand for Roycroft Renaissance, and their tails are rooted in the arts and crafts tradition of Hubbard and Ruskin. The circle represents eternity, and it's divided into 3 parts: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. This is The Philanthropy, East Aurora, New York, by Leighton Elton Hoffman, June 1st, 1907. I'm going to point out a few of the people that I know in this picture and a few suspects. So here's Albert Hubbard, his wife Alice, their daughter Miriam. I think this is the writer Catherine Yates. This is Jules Maurice Gaspard. This is Alexis Fournier. This is Sadakichi Hartmann. Sadakichi Hartmann. Sadakichi Hartmann, I'm sorry, I should know better. I believe this is Lillian Bonham. I don't know who this energetic young man is. We recognize this now as the door to the lounge at the Roycroft Inn. It was originally the print shop, and upon completion of the second print shop in 1901, this came to be called the Philanthropy. It was a term adopted from the French utopian philosopher Charles Fourier, and Hubbard said it was a meeting place of friends. Here visitors, artists, craftsmen, writers, and laborers would dine communally. Quoting author Felix Shea in his book Albert Hubbard of East Aurora, Jules Maurice Gaspard was a prince of fine gentlemen. There was none of the tousled or frowsy about him, and his ethics and philosophy were as fine as he was fine. Gaspard was dubbed Fra Gaspardino by Hubbard, and he was foreman of the print shop. He was a very accomplished portrait painter, illustrator, printer, and engraver. He was also a writer and art critic, and he was known to his fellow Roycrofters as Goss. Gaspard provided many of the frontispiece portraits for the Little Journeys series of books. He also taught illustration and portraiture at the Roycroft School of Arts with Alex Jean Fournier. Alex Fournier was a landscape painter in the Barbizon School. His tenure at the Roycroft was long and earned him title of the Roycroft Court Painter. He had established himself as a leading impressionist painter in Minneapolis before coming to East Aurora in 1903. He is considered to be one of the most prolific and influential painters of the arts and crafts era. Sadakichi Hartmann, 1898, by the photographer Zaida Ben Yusuf. He was born in the Nagasaki prefecture to Carl Hermann Hartmann and Osada Hartmann. His mother died shortly after his birth, and he was taken to Germany with his mother to be raised by their grandmother, while his father pursued business and other interests abroad. He came to the United States when he was 14 to stay with his uncle and immersed himself in studying art, literature, and entertainment. Sadakichi had a photographic memory. By the time he was 17, Sadakichi had become inspired by the poet Walt Whitman, and he sought him out as a mentor. He visited Whitman and would come to work for him as a translator for some foreign correspondence. Sadakichi could read, write, and speak English, French, and German, but not Japanese. The two men would remain close until Whitman's death in 1892. Sadakichi is thought to have written the first haikus in the English language. He cited his elder friend as a major influence and inspiration. Walt Whitman, I do not call thee master, but I am bound to thee forever. Thy works were to me, except love and nature, the grandest lessons of my life. In 1885, Hartmann left for Europe to explore its art galleries and museums. He studied art and literature in Munich, Berlin, Brussels, and Paris, and worked as a stage apprentice at the Royal Theatre in Munich. He used his time to study all aspects of the theater as well as ballet. He wrote a well-received biography of the painter James Whistler, and also found work writing art and dance critiques for periodicals. Sadakichi was well served by his great memory and deep knowledge of art and his command of the English language. He tried his hand at theatrical production with an avant-garde multimedia presentation that featured slide projection, music, motion picture clips, and fragrances. For some reason, it was not commercially successful. Sadakichi was known for his wild improvisational dances. He would dance even in his later years, according to this witness at a Hollywood party in the 1930s. He danced like a graceful, whirling dervish. Isadora Duncan is said to have been influenced by his dancing. He was a visionary, and he spoke of composers creating pieces of electromagnetic music whose vibrations do not simulate orchestral instruments, but open up horizonless vistas of pure sound. This seems to have foretold the synthesizer. Around 1906, Sadakichi Hartmann came to East Aurora to do some writing for Albert Hubbard. He moved into this house on South Grove, across from Hamlin Park, with the Roycroft artist Lillian Bonham. Together, they had 5 children. He had also had 6 with a first wife and 1 more with another woman. Roycrofters George and Gladys Scheidemantel fondly recalled him in an interview with the director of the George Eastman Museum, Tony Bannon. They said he would be seen swooping around the campus in a great cape. With little urging from Ali Baba, he would leap upon a table in the inn and perform his dances. The photographer Edward Weston claimed he was the best interpretive dancer he had ever seen. He was a colorful and highly influential journalist and critic, and attracted great photographers to the Roycroft Campus at an exciting time at the history of photography. Sadakichi Hartmann was one of the earliest writers to recognize photography as an art form. He associated himself with Alfred Stieglitz to write articles and essays in the early photographic journals, Camera Notes, and Camera Work. He wrote nearly 700 known published articles on the subject of photography, often using pseudonyms, usually as Sidney Allen, and occasionally as Caliban. A collection of his selected essays and profiles of photographers is found in a book called The Valiant Knights of Daguerre. The journal Camera Work was the result of a rift in the Camera Club of New York. Alfred Stieglitz, editor of Camera Notes, which was the official organ of the Camera Club of New York, wanted to feature articles about photography as an expressive medium, while most of the membership of the Camera Club of New York prefer to focus on photography as a documentary craft. Alfred Stieglitz created Camera Work and was free to pursue fine art content. Sadakichi left East Aurora in 1917. He was crowned King of the Bohemians in Greenwich Village by Guido Bruno. He had an appearance in the 1924 Douglas Fairbanks silent film, The Thief of Baghdad, pictured here as the court magician. This is a portrait of Sadakichi by Ben Berlin. Sadakichi was known to have taken strong drink from time to time. Oh, to be Sadakichi. Oh, to squeeze every moment out of life and release some of the water from that overflowing well of ideas incessantly needing to be expressed. Ezra Pound. Still life of a floating rose by Clara Ciprel. Clara Ciprel exhibited her first photos with the Buffalo Camera Club in 1910. It was closed to women at the time, but because her brother was a member, she was allowed to participate. She won second prize for one of her portraits. Although she couldn't become a member, she was able to continue exhibiting in the annual shows. In 1913, she won 6 prizes at the show, surpassing any of the club's rostered members. Still life with figurine, Clara Ciprel. Sadakichi Hartmann took notice of Clara's pieces at the show and wrote 2 favorable reviews of her work. Her success prompted an invitation by Sadakichi to speak at various photography clubs in New York City. She moved there in 1915 and opened up her own photography studio in Greenwich Village. This is Paul Fournier, self-portrait, 1905. Paul was the son of the painter Alex Fournier. He was a pictorialist photographer. We can see the iconic Roycrofter tie and perhaps the wall of a print shop as background. Alfred Stieglitz by Edward Steichen, 1915 at Gallery 291. The little galleries of the photo succession at 291 Fifth Avenue, New York City, was created and managed by Alfred Stieglitz. The gallery was crucial in getting photography acknowledgement as a fine art by exhibiting the work of photographers, including Edward Steichen, Alvin Langdon Colburn, Gertrude Casabier, F. Hollanday, and Clarence H. White. The photo succession was formed to establish photography as a fine art, upending the traditional belief that it was a documentary craft. The prevailing aesthetic of the photo succession was called photo pictorialism. Fred Hollanday, self-portrait, December 31st, 1910. In 1900, Day organized the New School of American Photography, the first exhibit of American pictorialist photography in Europe. Held in London and Paris, the show featured his own photographs as well as works by Edward Steichen, Gertrude Casabier, and Clarence White. Alfred Stieglitz included Day's photographs and writing in the early journal Camera Notes, but he was never able to persuade him to become an official member of the photo succession. Here's a portrait by Fred Hollanday of Mrs. Cora Potter from 1897, the platinum print. Cahill Gibran by F. Hollanday in 1897, another platinum print. It's notable that Day was so committed to the platinum printing process that yielded these beautiful tones that when the First World War made platinum unavailable from Russia, in 1915 he ceased printing photographs. Edward Steichen, self-portrait, 1903. Edward Gene Steichen was a modernist, painter, photographer, and museum creator at Museum of Modern Art. Although the chiaroscuro and evident brushstrokes suggest a painting, they are a result of the gum bichromate printing process. Steichen advanced the photosecessionist cause through photographs his collaboration with close friend Alfred Stieglitz. Steichen's photographs frequently appeared in camera work during its publication from 1903 to 1917 with his colleague Stieglitz. Steichen opened the little galleries of the photo succession, which eventually became known as 291, its street number, in 1905. Steichen and Stieglitz promoted photographers and other modern American artists, while also apprising artists of the latest developments in the early 20th century European modernism, including the works of Auguste Rodin, Pablo Picasso, Constantin Brancusi, and Francis Picabia. This is entitled Aurora, 1916, and it's by Wilbur Herbert Porterfield. Porterfield gained an international reputation for his style of photography that often portrayed the Western New York landscape. His photographs regularly appeared in the Sunday rotogravure insert in the Courier Express in a popular feature called As Porterfield Sees It. Wilbur H. Porterfield was the founder of the Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo. As with the Linked Ring in England and the Photo Successionists of New York City, their goal was to elevate photography as a fine art. The members explored the technical, thematic, and aesthetic boundaries of the photographic medium. The Photo Successionists and Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo faced a challenge overcoming public perceptions of photography. By the early 20th century, photographs had been used in newspapers and other forms of documentation for almost 50 years. Photography was burdened by what Anthony Bannon called in his essay, The Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo, the albatross of fact. The Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo earned international acclaim. This is a Venice canal scene, circa 1908, by Charlotte Spalding. Charlotte Spalding studied photography with Edward Steichen and became a member of the famous Photo Succession, a group of American photographers led by Alfred Stieglitz. Charlotte Spalding was born in Buffalo and married Langdon Albright, son of J.J. Albright, the benefactor of the Albright Gallery. Water Lily, not dated, by Augustus Jackson Thibodeau. Attorney Augustus Jackson Thibodeau was another of the founders of the Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo. His friends included Sadakichi Hartmann, Alfred Stieglitz, and Max Weber. Dreamy, isn't it? This catalog was published on the occasion of the International Exhibition of Pictorial Photography, which was on view at the Albright Art Gallery from November 3rd, 1909 to December 1st, 1910. The initial development of the 1910 International Exhibition of Pictorial Photography began after the enthusiastic reception of an exhibition of local photographers, the Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo, which closed at the Albright Art Gallery on October 2nd, 1907. The following spring, Dr. Charles M. Kurtz, the first director of the Albright Art Gallery, visited Stieglitz and Edward Steichen at the little galleries of the Photo Succession. Their intention was to discuss another exhibition, one of international scale, and Kurtz requested the aid of both the Photo Pictorialists of Buffalo and the Photo Succession in organizing the exhibition. The exhibition was brilliantly installed by the painter Max Weber, who transformed the most beautiful gallery in America, as Stieglitz once described the museum, into an intimate space for the viewing and understanding of contemporary photography. In total, Stieglitz's Buffalo show introduced the museum's audience to more than 600 photographs by 65 artists. We'll have a look at 3 images from the Albright Gallery International Exhibition of Pictorial Photography, starting with this by Heinrich Kuhn, German, still life, 1908. It was a gum bichromate print, 6 3/4 by 9. This by Alfred Stieglitz, U.S. It's entitled The Street, 5th Avenue, 1896. It's a photogravure, and the image area is 12 by 9 inches. I'm going to go back. Stieglitz was known for his use of atmosphere in his photographs. I think during this snowstorm, it really gave a nice look to this picture. This by James Craig Annan, Scottish. It's called the Lombardy Ploughing Team from 1894. It's a carbon print, and it's 4.5 inches by 10.5 inches. I thank you for your attention, and I hope you have enjoyed the images I've shared and found the characters in my story interesting. I will close with one of my new photographs from Biltmore House in Asheville, North Carolina, called The Loggia. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome.
Let's see if we have some questions coming through. I'm going to take off your computer screen here so we can see everybody. Okay, do we have any questions from the group? I know one of the things that I noticed, Peter, as you were showing the photographs is, I don't know, I know you were explaining a variety of different types of prints. Many of the pictures that you showed seem to have a painter quality about them. And I don't see that as much in modern photography. Is it the process that people use now with digital cameras? I know they can alter them, through digital means, but I was amazed at just the different atmospheric and textural elements that were seen in those early photographs. Do you know anything about that as far as is it the paper used? Is it the process? Is it the camera? I mean, what was making those textual elements?
Yeah, that's a great question. And especially with the photo pictorialists, as they were trying to secede from that documentary aspect of photography. They wanted to, as Tony Bannon was talking about, expand the envelope of photography. So some of them aspired to actually create those painterly elements. That picture that I showed of Steichen, that self-portrait, he's actually standing in front of an easel, apparently, and actually has a paintbrush in his hand. That technique was, and there's actual brush strokes on the.
It looked like it, yeah.
On the image, those brush strokes are actually part of the printing process, where he's actually brushing the emulsion on the paper before he exposes it to light. And then there were a number of other styles that they were using to explore the full expressive ability of the medium of photography. So I guess that's what I have to say.
Some questions and comments. Peter, your presentation brought a realization of how much I love monochromatic work. What was the name of the female photographer who took the image of the rose in water?
Her name was Clara Ciprell, and her brother was also an accomplished photographer.
And they were American?
The American, they were both from Buffalo.
Okay.
And Grace has a number of, Grace Mybaum's gallery here in East Aurora has got a number of her photographs. Her brother's name was Francis. They called him Frank.
Also,
Peter, I want to make a comment, if I can, about your presentation as a whole. I thought you did a terrific job in showing us the evolution of photography as description into photography as art, and I thought that was terrific. You know, Ruskin, as you said at the very beginning, loved those early photographs and had some taken himself, but he basically saw them as recordings. In other words, things that could show us something that would disappear over time, and so it'll become a record. That quote that you used, which I liked very much, about how the shadows were too bright or the light was, you know, etc., from what you'd see with your own eye. He always basically thought it, if you think differently, let me know, but he always basically thought it as a recording medium. And I thought what you did, particularly as you come around to the turn of the century, the 20th century, is to show how with these photo pictorialists and others, it turns into a real art form and becomes one of the arts and crafts in a very serious way. So I want to compliment you on that. I thought that was terrific. I love the images that you use, Stieglitz, etc. They give us a sense of photography as a major art form. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to mess up some of these methods of photography here, so I will try my best and you can just correct me. I'll have the daguerreotype aged. Were they different colors at one time, cooler blacks and grays?
The daguerreotype process created a quite stable image. It was a copper plate that was coated in silver and highly polished. And then it was fumed with mercury vapor to sensitize it. And then it was developed, stopped, and fixed. And it became very stable, except with the exception of the tarnishing of the silver. So they were kept behind glass. The daguerreotype was sometimes, there was also a gold coating put on it after exposure. Yeah, after exposure and developing to give it a little bit different tone. So the images are very stable. The images come right out of the camera. The copper plate comes right out of the camera. And so sometimes those images are reversed right to left. I don't know if any, I don't know Venice well enough to know. But if you're looking at the daguerreotype itself, sometimes you see them reversed right to left. And sometimes there's a reversing mirror that's put on in front of the camera that rectifies that right to left appearance. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I hope so.
Coming through your wide-ranging presentation, many familiar names and new names came into context for me. Thank you, fascinating. Another comment, thank you, Peter. Have you ever used the gum bichromat or bromol process yourself? And again, I'm messing up those types of names, but.
No problem.
Yeah, gum bichromate or bromile. No, I don't. I haven't used any of that chemistry. The only chemistry I ever used was two systems, color transparency system that printed directly, and also normal black and white chemistry. But No, I don't know those archaic processes.
I just want to make a comment.
Go ahead, Holly.
Hi, I just want to make a comment that I brought up the bromoil because I wasn't familiar with the bichromate process until I saw your examples there, Peter, and they're fascinating. They're gorgeous. And but down here with the Museum of the American Arts and Crafts Movement, I know they have a pretty massive collection of pictorial photography and secession photography. And I was introduced to when I walked in the offices there a couple of years ago, I saw bromoils for the first time, which are beautifully painterly and have some almost a golden sheen to it. And the gum bichromate process reminded me of it and seemed a little bit even more accessible than a bromoil, which is almost a lithograph process using actual printing ink and using a wet, resistant sort of oily, greasy surface kind of thing.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for introducing me to the gum bichromate process.
Yeah, and so nice to see you, Holly.
Great to see you too.
Yeah, and you make a good point, and maybe going back to Alan's original question, but yeah, the laying on of that emulsion, the sensitive goo of the chemistry onto the paper itself was actually done with a brush sometimes,
Yep.
and
Very tactile.
that is tactile, and it also yields those brush strokes and a paint-like quality.
Yeah, thank you. They were great examples.
I have a specific question. I would like to ask Peter and Kateri and yourself. Hubbard made such a great difference in founding the arts and crafts in America, we know that he was a terrific writer. Did he ever draw? Did he ever do modern photography? I mean, they were around him. He knew of them. Did he ever dabble in those things? I don't recall any real images of either.
I don't know of any.
Okay.
That's a good question. I can't say as I've ever seen anything.
But you folks would know if anybody would know because you're there all the time.
I don't know of any either, just writings.
Yeah.
Just writing, yeah, got it.
I kind of look at him almost like Walt Disney in the sense of he seemed to surround himself with all these other amazing artists that kind of brought his ideas to the surface, although Walt Disney did do drawing. But as far as I know, Hubbard was only writing. Peter, back to those processes just one more time. How easy would it be for an artist of contemporary times to even try some of these processes? It just seems like so much is digital nowadays that, even trying to find, a dark room somewhere that you could even go to even try some of these processes, I think would be rather difficult.
Well, of course you need a dark room, and there are photographers that have those at their disposal, so that's where you'd start. And then, then you start with, and Holly and Kateri know better than me. You start with specific papers that want to draw that emulsion into them, and you work in complete darkness to coat those emulsions, and then you make your exposure. So, from a person working in a chemistry darkroom, I guess they could do it.
I did see one thing though, because I'd never come across gum bichromate before, and I did a quick look on Google, of course, while you were talking, and there is actually a digital negative access. If you just have a printer in Photoshop, you can come up with your negative that way, and it's solar exposure using the gum bichromate chemistry and some watercolor tinting. So there is sort of a digital back end into the process where you could actually get into the painterly aspects of it. And I might give that a shot myself just to play with it.
Well, that's an awesome suggestion because so many of those prints were made with a glass plate, contact printing without an enlarger. So yeah, great idea. And not an inauthentic idea.
Yeah.
I see a question in the chat from, and it brings up a really, really good point. Has the work of Ansel Adams entered into my studies? And I'm a fan. I'm not a scholar in anything. I'm just a ham and egger, but you know, Ansel Adams is great. And you know what happened? Stieglitz moved on from the photo secession and from the, you know, and he was a real thought leader in photography and always was. And he moved on and he sort of dropped photo pictorialism. The F-64 school came along and he adopted that. You know, those were Weston, you know, and Ansel Adams, and Stieglitz was, you know, a thought leader in that group too. So it's interesting to break it up, bring that up, but that's where photography went after about 1920. And in fact, it is said that the show in Buffalo, that first international show that really put photo pictorialism on the map, was really the high watermark. And after about 1917, it went nowhere.
Peter, you wouldn't happen to know, does the Albright still have a lot of these photographs?
Yeah, that's a good point. They bought dozens of those 600 photographs, and they still have them. Yeah, and Grace, my mom, has got a good number in her collection. She's got works by Charlotte Spalding Albright, Clara Ciprell, and Frances Ciprell, as I said earlier.
And for those who aren't from around the region, the Albright Knox is currently closed because they're doing an extremely large expansion of the museum. They're going to be almost doubling the museum in size. So hopefully, if that is the case, some of these photographs will be able to be seen on a more regular basis. I know it's the few times I've seen photographs there that weren't traveling exhibits were usually a small little side hallway down in the basement kind of thing, where hopefully they'll start showing these a little bit more. Well, I think that might wrap it up for today. Thank you once again to our two presenters, Kateri and Peter. They were wonderful again. Next week, again, we will be having two presenters, Rick Oler, who is a writer. Oh, there's Rick. Hi, Rick. And yours truly. I will be talking about Roycroft books next week. So hopefully we will see you all back here. Once again, we have 2 more weeks to go. And until then, everyone have a wonderful, healthy week, and we will see you next Saturday. And thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.